This is Michael Coffey, pastor of First English Lutheran Church in Austin, Texas, and this is another Tiny Desk sermon, a first impression and impromptu reflection on the readings for this coming Sunday. This coming Sunday is October 8th. It's lectionary 27 or proper 22. The gospel reading is from Matthew, and it's getting into some of the really difficult sections of Matthew as conflict increases between Jesus and religious leaders. And in Matthew 21:33 and following, we hear, Jesus said to the people, "Listen to another parable. There was a landowner who planted a vineyard, put a fence around it, dug a wine press in it, and built a watchtower. Then he leased it to tenants and went to another country. When the harvest time had come, he sent his slaves to the tenants to collect his produce. But the tenants seized his slaves and beat one, killed another, and stoned another. Again he sent other slaves, more than the first, and they treated them in the same way. Finally he sent his son to them, saying, 'They will respect my son.' But when the tenants saw the son, they said to themselves, 'This is the heir. Come, let us kill him and get his inheritance.' So they seized him, threw him out of the vineyard, and killed him. Now when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do to those tenants?" They said to him, "He will put those wretches to a miserable death, and lease the vineyard to other tenants who will give him the produce at the harvest time." Jesus said to them, "Have you never read in the scriptures, 'The stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone'? This was the Lord's doing, and it is amazing in our eyes. Therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people that produces the fruits of the kingdom. The one who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces, and it will crush anyone on whom it falls." When the chief priests and the Pharisees heard his parables, they realized that he was speaking about them. They wanted to arrest him, but they feared the crowds because they regarded him as a prophet. So, parable Jesus is telling to confront his challengers, his enemies. It's difficult stuff in many ways. I do want to point out, at least first, what is historically a bad reading of this text, which is to see Jesus saying that God is rejecting Israel and giving the kingdom to the church. This is called supersessionism. It's very anti-Jewish, and it's historically the way Christians have read many biblical texts, and it's just not only bad and in many ways immoral, it's just wrong. And the text tells us that that's not the case. What does it say? The parable is about the chief priests and the Pharisees. These are the religious leaders of the times. These are the people who, through their own self-righteousness, their own self-interest, had misguided their followers, misguided the people, the nation, and had created all kinds of problems. The parable uses the metaphor of the vineyard, and this comes directly from the first reading for Sunday, which is Isaiah chapter 5. And I just want to read the last part of Isaiah chapter 5 from this coming Sunday. It talks about God planted a vineyard, and it was God's chosen people, but then the wild grapes grew, and the vineyard was no good. So God judges the vineyard, much like the parable. But at the end it says, "For the vineyard of the Lord of hosts is the house of Israel, and the people of Judah are his pleasant planting. He expected justice, but saw bloodshed, righteousness, but heard a cry." So this ending of Isaiah tells us, what is God's intention for planting this vineyard, for nurturing and nourishing this people to be God's people? The intention is to create justice and righteousness. That didn't happen, and God isn't going to put up with that kind of sour grapes that comes out of the vineyard. One of the best word plays in Hebrew is in this text. Hebrew texts often use lots of word plays that we don't get when we hear them translated into English. When it says he expected justice but saw bloodshed, the word for justice is mishpat, and the word for bloodshed is mispak. So he expected mishpat but saw mispak. And then righteousness is tzedakah, but heard a cry is something like zedadak. So the wordplay is trying to play up how they missed the point of what God expected. These two texts together tell me that at this moment in our lives, it's not about blaming one group or the other. It's about the importance of our leadership. It's about the importance of those who are called to pursue righteousness and justice for the sake of the people. And when our leadership fails at that, God does not tolerate that, because God is willing to give the vineyard to the people instead of the leaders. We're in a challenging moment in our nation, in the United States, with leadership that I believe is failing us in many ways. At the same time, we have some leaders who are rising up right now to inspire us and show us what leadership looks like, which is to serve and care for people, to pursue justice, and to create righteousness. I see that happening in Puerto Rico with General Jeff Buchanan, a fine man I know from my previous church, who has gone in to try to organize and lead this recovery effort, which is so desperate, after other leadership that shall go unnamed has only sat back and derided the leaders in Puerto Rico and the people of Puerto Rico. The leadership of General Buchanan is what we need. What kind of leadership do we need in the church? Is it leaders that simply try to promote their own self-interest, to try to maybe make the church look like something great and powerful and impressive and wealthy and virtuous? Or is it church leaders that help the whole church pursue justice and righteousness for the sake of the vulnerable and those in need, like the people in Puerto Rico? We can pray that the church can be the vineyard that produces the sweet wine of justice and righteousness in the world. Peace to all.